I'm real apprehensive about taking those customers because you'll never get it exactly how they want it done because they can't tell you exactly how they want it done.
What's happening, Skid Steer Nation? It's your host, Ryan Deemer, and we've got back for another episode of the Skid Steer Nation podcast. If you have not subscribed, please do. That's how we know you guys are listening to this. And before we introduce the guest today, I just want to take a minute, man. It's holiday season. It's almost the end of November, beginning of December. Weather's getting cold, ground's starting to freeze. Fingers aren't working the way they used to do anymore. Just remember, man, we had 9 awesome months to really kick butt and make some money. So appreciate the downtime, spend it with the family. I know I need a reminder on that from time to time. So before we introduce Greg, I do want to take one more minute to just remind everybody that in addition to podcasts, we also sell skid steer attachments. So head over to skidsteernation.com. We partner with American family-owned manufacturers. They have quality and craftsmanship above profits. Their products are extremely durable. If you're using these attachments to actually make a living, these are the ones that you want because you don't need something that's going to break down or bend or cause you to drive 3 hours back to get something different. All that downtime is just digs into your profit margin. So high quality attachments are worth the investment and they're a tax write-off. So if you got some cash burning in your pocket, head over to skidsteernation.com, pick up some attachments, and you can write them off on the 2023 tax season. Man, I'm excited today. Greg Poehler, he's up in Maine, Carmel, Maine, right about the dead center of the state. His company is called Carmel Land Services, and he's been doing it now for about 5 years. And before that, he was an offshore marine engineer with a little Kubota tractor. So we're going to dig into Greg's story and hear where he's at today and what his vision for the future is. Greg, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, bud.
Yeah, man. So like I was saying, it's the end of November. You said, what, it's 22 degrees and windy up there?
Yeah, 22 degrees and windy. So having to sit inside the shop and have a maintenance day certainly didn't, there was no tears shed at all today to get this.
Didn't hurt your feelings on that.
No, not a bit. No.
And we were talking before the show started, like when I was a teenager, you couldn't keep me out of that. Like outside running around, your mom's yelling at you, get in the house, you're going to catch a cold. Now in my 40s, I'm like, it looks good through the window.
Yeah, I'm with you. Every year I get older, I just question why I'm still living in these Arctic conditions. But the summertime, you can't beat it up here. So
I bet the season change in fall is just spectacular.
Yeah, we have 5 seasons. We say that we have spring, summer, fall, and winter, and then there's a mud season in that spring season. But from all the snow runoff, but every season outside of winter, I there's no place I would rather be. One of the things about working offshore drilling for oil, all this is that I've been all over the world, and there's a reason I keep coming back here. So, yeah,
man, it's home, right? It's home.
That's right. You got that right.
Awesome. So, offshore marine engineer. I got an idea of what you did, but I really want to find out from you firsthand. So, give me a little background on that, just a brief one, and
Well, I went to marine engineering school at Maine Maritime Academy, which is in Castine, Maine, down near the coast, obviously. It's a 4-year sort of a military regimented school. When you graduate out, you have a United States Coast Guard license that you have to test for. So I had a marine engineering license through the U.S. Coast Guard. And I set out in 2003 to go drill for oil. So I've been on rigs all over this world, from Brazil and Korea, and spent a significant amount of time down in the Gulf of Mexico drilling for oil down there. And spent about 19 and a half years doing that. And then, it was just a little hobby thing at home. I had a little bit of property with a little small tractor, and, people started asking if I could do this when I was home or I could do that while I was home. I mean, it was pretty easy to do because I was working a month on, month off. So you'd be gone for 28 days and then I'd be home for 28 days. Well, my wife works, she's a nurse and all that sort of stuff. So she'd be gone to work, and I'm just sitting around, the honey-do list. You get everything caught up from your month away. And I just like to piddle and work on stuff around. And then the next thing you know, it's, the phone starts ringing more and more and more. So,
yeah. And you got to do something, because otherwise as men, we just get in trouble.
Yeah, I, my mother gives me a hard time all the time. Says that there's not a chill bone in my body. Like I don't have the. It's pretty rare to see me sitting on the couch. I'm going to find something to do. But
Yeah.
so it started off as if I'm going to go find something to do, I might as well make some money doing it. And then now it's gotten to a point where it's all I do. So
Yeah.
I love it.
So how long were you just tinkering with it on your month off when you weren't offshore drilling? Like, was that a year, a couple years?
Yeah, I didn't commit to doing this full time for about 3 years. One of the
Okay.
most important things that I had to kind of iron out, and I'm a major planner. I can't do anything without a plan. So I that a lot of that came from the offshore side. I mean, I had spent several years as the chief engineer on the ship, and I'm basically in charge of all the maintenance and equipment on the rig. And we're dealing with day rates where that rig was making upwards of $700,000-800,000 a day, and you don't do anything without a plan, because if you cannot plan it out, then you're going to be set up for failure right from the get go. So I had kind of had to do the same thing with this business. I ended up, it got a little bit bigger, a little bit bigger. I kept, I was buying equipment, and I might as well buy this, I'll buy that. And then the next thing it was a hard thing to walk away from. There was a tremendous amount of money in the oil field, but there's also a tremendous amount of travel, a tremendous amount of time away from your family. And my kids I have two daughters, and they were getting to an age where they were ready for their father to be home. And, when they were real little, it was pretty easy. You'd go away and they never even really knew you'd left. But, they start getting into elementary school and stuff, and they were ready for me to be home. So anyway, I ended up going and getting a plan together and kind of making sure that this was going to be something that was going to be sustainable for me and my family. And then the oil field started to kind of tank a little bit when oil prices were really low. It's great for everybody except for the guys who work in the oil field. So they started cutting pay, cutting benefits, cutting all of these things that were getting worse and worse. And at the same time, I'm trying to weigh whether or not I want to do earthwork full time versus be going off there. So they kind of made the decision a hell of a lot more easier, right? Like if they're going to cut your pay 20% and your insurance rates are going to go up 20%, it's like, well, then I guess I don't need to make that much money when I'm doing earthwork, right? So
yeah, and then sometimes you need a little nudge.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. I mean, it was kind of one of those, I'd been kicking this can down the road for a year and a half or more, probably. And then when they finally, once things started getting bad enough, my wife and I had talked about it ad nauseum, really, about whether or not I was going to do this. And finally, it was just like, you know what? Let's just do it. I couldn't have done this without the support of her. She pretty much told me, she said, you don't have a fail. There's no such thing as failure for me. So I'm just going to do whatever I have to do to succeed. And I take that same mindset into my earthwork projects where, I've listened to several of the podcasts, and you ask guys what your biggest failure was. And that was a struggle for me to come up with that, because I can honestly tell you, I have never failed. I have just hit roadblocks.
Exactly. But again, and I always ask that question because I read an autobiography about this self-made billionaire female. She's the first female self-made billionaire, I think, in the U.S. Her name's Sarah Blakely. She started Spanx. And when she was a kid, every day at dinner, her father would ask her and her brother, "What did you fail at today?" And what she said was, he was training us to be able to say, it's okay to try something new and not be good at it, because it gives us something that we can work on and get better at. So if we're not afraid to fail or to not be good at something, then it doesn't limit our ceiling of where we think we can take it.
Yep.
So your mindset's the same way, right? Like, well, I'm not failing. I'm getting some very valuable advice from my in real world experience. I'm going to find a way to shift and maneuver and find a successful outcome through that roadblock.
Right. Yeah, I will never fail at something, because it's not a word that I can just believe in, right? If you fail at something, in my mind, that means that I tried it and it didn't work, and I can't do it any better. There's always something every single day when we go out to work. There's always something that we could do better, but it certainly doesn't mean that I'm going to fail. And if we hit a roadblock, I'm going to work and as hard as I possibly can for as long as I have to in order to overcome that roadblock. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah. And my other theory on that is if you're going to fail fast. So like if you're going to, let's say you want to grow a whole nother team and move into another town, and you do that and you're like, wait a minute, the market was not what I thought it was. There's not enough demand for the services we offer. Like fail fast, right? Close it, pivot, move it to a different market, consolidate back to your home. Like to me, like you're calling that a roadblock, but the word I would use would fail. But like, hey, don't be married to your ideas and your plan. Like be flexible and fluid.
Yeah.
You want to know who was really married to their plan that's not doing so well today? Newspapers.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I actually had a grandfather pass away a couple of weeks ago, and I had to go out, and it was the first newspaper I bought in ages. And I used to deliver newspapers. My first job when I was a kid, I was 8 years old. I went and got a paper route back when you used to ride your bike around town and deliver it to all the people. And I went and bought that newspaper. It's $1.75, and they don't even do it on Monday anymore. It's only Tuesday through Saturday. And I was like, my God, I got to go back to selling newspapers. They're making $1.75 a paper with this. I was giving people the paper for the whole week, and it was $2.35 for the whole week.
Yeah, but it's 10% of the circulation, so maybe even less.
Yeah, well,
and I know how they're making I know how they're making their money, because when my parents passed away, I about fell over when I saw how much they charged to put an obituary in a paper.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it
was like $800 to let people know that your relative passed away. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, nobody reads it in the paper. They all read it online now. Yeah,
exactly. So. Yeah, exactly. So anyway,
next time, just put it on Facebook. I guess that'll be my plan when it's my turn for my folks. So
I got a lot more from Facebook than I did that newspaper ad, but then I have the memory. Like you've got the paper now, right? Like you went out and bought them.
That's right. Yes, sir.
To do it so we can keep it as a memory.
Yeah, bought it and laminated it.
Yeah. So you and your wife talk ad nauseum. One, I think that's awesome, because I'm constantly reminded by some people that I hang out with, like your net worth is your net work. Like we're not able to do things alone. And when you can have your partner be a part of your network, both personally and professionally, it just strengthens the relationship, in my opinion. So I love that you said your wife and you talked ad nauseum about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was as far as me coming home from working offshore, that was something that it didn't just affect me; it affected everybody, and even my extended family. It was a big effect for them too, right? So, my parents they're not getting any younger by any means. So me being home, I'm able to help them with their stuff. They've recently bought a place in Florida, so they can go down there in the wintertime. So they're a lot more comfortable doing that, knowing that I'm home and I can help take care of their house and all that. But yeah, my wife and we talk. I should say I probably talk about everything as far as this business goes. And I think a lot of times she probably just sits there and rolls her eyes at it. But because I don't think I'm not always looking for input. I'm just looking for somebody to listen to what it is that I'm thinking. And I want somebody, a lot of times the best people to listen to what you have, what your ideas are people that are not directly associated with your business.
Yeah.
It's very easy to take, to look at something and say, hey, I'd like to go out and buy a new excavator, and it's going to cost me $100,000. And for somebody in the earthwork industry, they might say, yeah, do it, man. Yeah, do it. Yeah, do it. But then if you go talk to somebody who's not even at all experienced in that, they are going to have some questions that a lot of people wouldn't even come up with. I used to tell guys all the time when we were out on the rigs that some of the best guys to ask that are out on the rig are the people who are not familiar with what it is that they're looking at. We would do, there was a huge safety push out there. So once a week we would do these hazard hunts, and you would go and you'd get people to walk through an engine room and just look for stuff that isn't safe, like things that are potential to hurt people. And if you were one of the engineers in that engine room and you walked by that every day, to you, it's nothing, right? You just walk by it and you don't even recognize it. But we'd go grab somebody out of the galley who didn't even have any clue what they were looking at. And they'd go, hey, that looks dangerous right there.
Yeah.
And you'd kind of go, well, yeah, you're right. It does. But, we walk by it every day, so it doesn't throw a flag. Right. So that's one of the things that I do a lot with my wife is, I'll just bounce ideas off of her. And basically look for her to tell me that I'm being an idiot. And if she doesn't, then it's something that I'll pursue. But if she does say, Greg, you're not making any sense, then that's something I'll have to take her input with it as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, like when we kicked off Skid Steer Nation, I mean, I looked at online coaches. I looked at beauty supply companies. I looked at brick and mortar stores, and I would look and see what was being successful in other industries, not even close to excavation. And I'd be like, how are they using that system, that process, that software, whatever it was, that marketing strategy? And I'm like, how can I implement that and make it work for me? So like a lot of the inspiration I get for my business does not come from other companies serving the excavation industry.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I try to take every single idea and just bounce it off of somebody. It doesn't necessarily have to be my wife. Like my parents, I'll talk to my mother about it. My mother, I mean, she's a heck of a worker, but I'd have to tell her which one is the spade shovel and which one is the flathead shovel, right? But she'll work her tail off. But sometimes those are the best people to look outside of the box at. And you're exactly right. I'm always looking at what other people are posting on Facebook or what other websites look like or stuff like that. I'm not very good at it. That's probably one of my biggest struggles is trying to figure that whole realm out. I'm kind of, but I mean, it's an absolute necessity, right, in today's market to be good at it. So I'm plugging away at it. And
so here's what I would tell you first and foremost, man. Like the saying I've always heard is the shortest pencil lasts longer than the longest memory, right? So like when you see different websites or you see different campaigns or whatever you see, take a screenshot, take a picture, do something, and just create a file on your computer or your phone where you can save all those. Like we call it a swipe file, something you can swipe through for inspiration.
Yep.
Because even if you can't build the website or if you can't do the task that you're trying to accomplish, you can at least provide the guidance to the people you hire or the family, friends that want to help you out.
Yeah, funny story about building the website. I decided last winter I was going to build my own website. And there was probably a 48-hour period there where there was a really volatile Greg Pooler walking around that house. That was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. However, once I finally started to get the hang of it, it actually came out really good. But yeah, it was something that I mean, I had thrown my hands up in the air and I think everybody in the house learned a whole new vocabulary. There is such a thing as a offshore oil vocabulary and a home life vocabulary, and they got a lot of that offshore vocabulary down.
Yeah. We just dug into some new project on our website, and it's like I don't do any computer coding, and I'm not like a Google ninja. I mean, I know top level names, and I'm like, oh, we need to fix that. I don't know how to fix it, right? So now I'm actually having to dig in to learn how to fix all that stuff. And I think I was up till midnight last night, geeked out, compressing things, using this website for that, creating that, double checking that with these softwares. And like everybody in my network's like, I don't understand a thing you're doing. And I'm like, good, because I understand about a third of it.
Right.
we're just like building a website for you. Like I know enough to get rolling, and hopefully I figure the rest out as I go.
Well, the biggest thing I found about the website and where I struggled the most is creating a website that is properly formatted for a phone.
Yeah.
Because I would venture to guess that 99% of people will never view your website on a computer. Nobody sits down at a desktop anymore. They're flicking through an iPhone or an Android phone or whatever. So getting a website that actually looks good on that little phone screen and you don't have just a ton of information in it that you can't read. And I can tell you right off, I'm just as guilty as anybody else. I promise you that if I have to go on a website and I have to keep pinching in and zooming in to try and figure out what it is that I'm looking, I'm done. Yeah. No.
I'm out.
So it's just that was the biggest struggle. But I will say that website's probably been up for about a year now. And I have countless phone calls, emails, something from that. Just as something as simple as having the little buttons on the website that's just saying call for a free estimate.
Call now. Yeah. And then they can click it.
Yeah. And they just hit it and it goes right through on their phone and they're not trying to type it in off of a website. And it costs almost next to nothing to keep the website going with all the domain licensing and all that stuff. But once it's an invaluable tool as far as my business has gone.
So, and I've talked about this. It's been a while actually, but in a lot of other past episodes, like I'm a huge proponent of doing tasks that are very heavy in the front, like creating a website, but can work for me for a very long time with minimal effort or work.
Yeah, and that's what my website is. The only thing I think I'd change on a regular basis is I'll go in every 2 or 3 months and just add photos of more current projects or whatever. But
you're talking about minutes.
Outside of that, it's really not a whole lot to it. It just kind of sits over there in the ether and runs itself, and it's been well worth it. But other than my kids now know some words that they probably shouldn't. But I mean,
shouldn't know.
They were going to find out eventually.
Yeah, like our team works remote, right? So for me to say, hey, I want you to do this, 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 and this verbally, it never gets done right. Yeah. So I found that it's worth 5, 10, even an hour of my time to, depending on the size of the project, to like systematically write out a standard operating procedure and then give it to that employee. And 9.7 times out of 10, it's done perfect. So my 1 hour of work making sure they do it right, and let's say it took them 12 hours to finish the task, saved me 11 hours from having to do it myself.
Yeah, and it's all dependent on the people too. One of the things that, as you climb the ladder in the offshore engineering industry, you have more and more people that are working directly for you and under you, and are looking to you for guidance. And one of the things that I had to figure out very early on is trying to figure out how to treat each person to get the most out of them. And I don't mean that in like having to treat somebody special, but if you worked for me in that oil rig, if I might have to come down and tell you suck in order to get you to go out and work harder. And then if I did that to the next guy standing next to you, he'd crumble up and go sit in a corner somewhere and you wouldn't get anything out of him.
Yep.
So that's the hardest thing or one of the most important things in that chief engineer role was trying to figure out how to get all 40 of 50, 60 of these people to work at their peak and what it is that gets them to want to come to work every morning.
Yeah.
And look forward to it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a huge challenge. I can certainly sympathize with you having to deal with that. Thankfully, I got 2 guys that work for me seasonally now, and I don't have to deal with the people thing all that much. But
but I remember I had a business partner. God, this was 18, 19 years ago. And he was very alpha male. Like he was the big dog in our industry. We own bars and restaurants. Like he owned some of the biggest ones in town. We were partnering on a new one. And it was always his way or the highway. And I really struggled with our partnership. And I remember, I don't even know if somebody recommended it to me or if I just did some research, but I found a book and it basically broke down that there's 4 personality types, right? People that need to be told what to do. I don't remember all 4 of them now. One of them though was people that need to be guided to think it's their idea.
Yep.
And I was like, holy shit, that's my partner. And from that moment forward, whenever I had an idea that I wanted to do in the business, I would soft play it and talk about the problem and then be like, well, what if, you complement this with that? And then he'd be like, we just need to do this. And I'm like, hot damn, that's what I was going to recommend. But if I would have recommended that from the bat, it would have been a hard no.
Right.
So it's that same technique of learning the personality types to get the most out of them.
Yeah. What I've found the most with all employees is that everybody wants to feel like you're vital to whatever operation it is that you're in.
Self-worth.
Right. If you go down and you tell every single person, I want you to do this and you to do this and you to do that, then it's not really their idea. And eventually they're going to be tired of it. But I guess the best example I have of that is that when I was the chief engineer of the rig, I'd have about a half a dozen engineers that stayed in the engine room. There was another 8 or 10 mechanics that were working in the mechanic shop. Then you had the electrical and the IT departments that were also there. So total on the rig, you have about 30 guys in your department. And every day we'd have to have multiple meetings in the morning, like just a kickoff meeting, whatever it is you were going to do. And I would tell the engineers, for instance, I'd say, look, that's your engine room, right? You guys went to to a maritime academy like I did. You know what to do in that engine room. I'm going to let you run that engine room how you want to run that engine room. Right. So I would go to the second engineer or the first engineer, whoever, and just say, hey, man, you got it. I'm not even going to be involved in it. And I'm going to let you do that until you prove otherwise that I need to be involved in it. And those guys would be so much happier knowing that, well, I can come down here today and I can do what I want to do, not what I have to do. Right. And as long as the jobs are getting done, I mean, everything's a computer-based maintenance system down there anyway. If you're able to prioritize what needs to be done on that, instead of me telling you to go do it, and you know that, okay, well, this is the most important thing we have to do today, and that's what you get knocked out, then those guys looked forward to going to work every day.
Yeah.
Whereas the same stuff was getting done as if I went down and gave everybody a list and said, hey, do A, B, and C. But that's not their idea at that point. So just letting people feel like they're important to the operation and they have some freedom, and all the chief trusts me, like that sort of stuff it's invaluable for getting a group of people to work well for you.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of like finding strengths and then doubling down on those strengths, whether you're yourself or your team, and then trying to eliminate things that they struggle with. Like somebody on the team is good at the things they struggle at, and vice versa. So it's like mixing jobs and tasks to person.
Right. The old saying, find out what you're terrible at and don't do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
like, we were taught so wrong in school, man. Like you're terrible at writing. Well, then spend 5 extra hours learning to write. I'm like, nah, man, I'll just use a computer. Like there's ways around it.
That's correct.
Yeah. I mean, if I wrote you a letter right now, you'd get it. I couldn't even read it to you. I'd be like, I don't remember what I wrote. I can't read the letters. It's terrible. My hand tries to keep up with how fast my mind thinks, and it's not a good combination.
Yeah, well, y'all having the fact you type emails now probably doesn't help things either. So
I'm getting so bad, Greg, that I'm actually doing voice to text. Like I just double tap the button on my computer and I just start talking, and then I go up and I just place the paragraphs where I want them and I send it, because even my fingers have like I'm such a sloppy typer because my mind's just like rolling and I'm not paying attention. But again, find where your weaknesses are and then find a way to overcome them. Don't power through them. Like I'm never going to slow down to type pretty emails.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, you just have to figure out what it is you're good at and do that. And then figure, you can still certainly work on things, but it's the earthwork business is no different. There's things that my company, we are phenomenal at.
Yeah.
And then there's other things that we're just not really that good at. So if somebody, septic systems, for instance, we get a dozen calls a year about somebody wanting us to come and either replace or install a new septic. And I'll tell them, we can do the septic, but I don't really like doing the septics. We're not that great at it. We can certainly do it. They'll be done right. It's just time consuming, and it's just something that we don't do a ton of. So we tend to try and hand those off to somebody. But like our niche up here that we've found is lawns. So I would say about 70% of our business is new lawn installation and construction. So we have so many houses being built up here and so many subdivisions. And you get in a subdivision, it's they're always chasing each other.
Yeah.
And that's what ends up happening, is that people are spending $500,000 on a brand new home. And when they're building this home, they're worried about the stake. They're not worried about the peas. So they're going into the house on a daily basis when this house is being constructed, and they're, making sure their cabinets are right and their flooring is right and they're all of the little things inside. Well, in order to get an occupancy permit for a house, you have to have a lawn because of erosion control. So these people will go out, and the general contractor, if you're not worried about that lawn, you're just going to get the cheapest thing that they can give you. If you have topsoil, it's an 1/8 of an inch thick, and they go out with a 50-pound bag of grass seed, throw it out, straw the hell out of it, and then say, there you go, you're going to have a lawn. Well, somebody's gone and built this great big colonial house, and the next thing you know, they have this grass it's spotty, and it's summer grass, some are here, some are there, So we'll go in and do one house in that subdivision. And a lot of times, if it's a subdivision that I haven't been in, I'll honestly price it at a fairly low rate just to get
in the door.
one house. And before I'm done, there's 11 more lawns to be done before we even finish the first one, because the car is driving out of the end of the cul-de-sac saying, hey, come see me when you get done work today.
Oh, I bet.
So, and the grass
So
we put in minimum 3 inches of topsoil, hydroseed grass application.
Hydroseed is what I was going to ask you.
You have to make sure that you educate the homeowner and what it is that they need to have in order to have successful grass. I've found a lot of times if you explain it to them in fairly basic terms that you cannot water this grass and eventually you will have grass. But if you come out here and you try to water this twice a day, within 3 weeks, you're going to have grass that's 4 inches long and it's going to look like that guy across the street. But if you don't do what he did, you're not going to have that. And because of the competition that they have and they want to make sure that their house looks as nice as the one across the street, they do it.
Oh, absolutely, man. Nothing better than keeping up with the Joneses for a business model.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
I mean, so we live just outside. We live in a private drive by the woods, by a park forest preserve, but the neighborhood right next to us is pretty affluent. And like this guy got one house so he could decorate with Christmas lights last year. I bet there's 25 houses in that neighborhood. And you can just tell by the way the lights are strung, that dude did them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a really common thing up here is that people they drive by. And I, to be honest, though, one of the most important things also I find is making sure that my lawn looks like that. So, you hear about the mechanic who has their vehicles are always falling apart, right?
Yeah.
Or the carpenter whose house is falling down. Yeah, you cannot be that guy in this part of this industry. If somebody, I can promise you, if you drove down my yard and I told you what road I live on, you could drive down this road and know which house is mine.
Okay.
Knowing what it is that I do and what we specialize in, my yard has checkerboard stripes in it where that people want a lawn. If they're going to drive by and they're going to go, damn, look at your lawn. This guy must know what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing.
Right. So it's the whole appearance thing. You have to have, clean equipment, clean vehicles, things aren't leaking oil all over somebody's yard, just clean up after yourself. It amazes me how many earthwork guys you'll go around and they'll go do residential earthwork. And when they leave, the driveway is full of mud. Like, man, a leaf blower is $100, a battery powered leaf blower. Sweep that driveway up and blow the stuff off of the driveway. Just little stuff like that is what gives you a leg up. So that's what we try to do. I actually have one of the guys that works for me in the summertime. He's a younger kid. He's 17 and he wants to go to Maine Maritime now after the discussions I've had with him and stuff. But one of the things that we always said, working offshore, especially on a lot of that big equipment, is that you have to do everything a little bit better than what you're supposed to do it, right? Just that 10% will gain you 200%.
Right.
So, and Trevor, the guy who's working for me, he does the same thing. When he first started off 2 years ago, if I told him, hey, go rake the left side of that driveway, he would rake the left side. Well, now after having several conversations with him and trying to, help him out and understand that just do a little bit extra. Now if I say, hey, go rake the left side of the driveway, he'll rake it. And then he's looking there going, I bet you he's going to want me to do the right side when I'm done with this. So he'll go over and just do it all.
Just go do it. Yeah, you're developing that culture. You're developing a culture, customer first. We leave it better than we found it. It's who we are. It's in our DNA. And, cultures don't happen overnight. Like, you got to build that stuff. And that's one of the things we always preach to you guys. Now, I don't care if it's just you and you hire an employee. If you're not following the culture guidelines that you want him to follow, he's not going to follow me either.
Right. Yeah, you have to have a high standard, I've found as this business owner. And I always try to I tell people that I'm not going to leave here until this looks how I want it, how I would want it to look if it were mine. And quite frankly, those are mostly the jobs that I want to go for now. I'm busy enough now that we don't take every job. I would say we probably, out of every 10 estimates that we go do, we might land 3 of them, which is in my mindset, that's acceptable. I'm not the cheapest guy. I don't want to be. And I don't want to work for the people that want the cheapest guy. I want to work for the people who want the best guy. And they're willing to pay a little bit of extra money to make sure that it's done correctly. And the other thing that always makes me steer clear of new potential customers is when they have something exact how they want it. I tell people all the time, like, I'm not going to tell Picasso how to paint, right? So if you're going to go get a tattoo, the worst thing you can do is come in with a piece of paper and tell the tattoo artist, I want this, right? These guys are artists. Let them do their thing. Come to them with an idea and let me tell you what's going to look amazing. If you can't go and look at my previous work and understand that I'm going to give you something that's probably better than what you anticipated, and you're going to give me that freedom to kind of do what maybe not exactly how you want to do it, but it's probably going to even be better, then I'm real apprehensive about taking those customers, because I've found that those people, you'll never get it exactly how they want it done, because they can't tell you exactly how they want it done.
And listen, that's not a people person problem. That's a brain problem. Like, our emotions are not tied to the part of the brain that allows you to speak and have vocabulary. So when you're emotionally connected to something, that there's literally there's no words to describe it.
Yeah, and those best customers are the ones that they invite you to their home or to their project, and they say, "This is what I have for a problem, and I have no idea how to fix it. What do you think?"
Yeah,
and that to me, that's when things can really work out, and I can say, "Well, this is what I would do if this were my home. I would do A, B, and C," and they just say, "Just send me the estimate, man.
Do it."
Right, and I would just about every single time that you were allotted that freedom, when they get home at the end of the day, or when they see it fully completed at the end of the week or month or whatever, however long it is you're on that site, they're incredibly enthused about it, and they're super happy about it, because they didn't have this channel mindset that they only want it to look a certain way.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. I mean, we always preach, and I've said it numerous times before, though, like the old philosopher Pareto, who talked about the 80-20 rule. And the bottom 20% of your customers will create 80% of your headaches.
Yeah, that's for sure. And
the top 20% will generate 80% of your revenue.
Yeah, I can't argue with anything about that. That's pretty much factual with everything that.
Well, do you remember when we were in school and the teacher would put us in groups of like 5, 6, or 8? We'd have to work on a group project. There'd always be 2 or 3 that just hammered through it. Then there'd be 3 or 4 that did nothing. It's the same drill. It's the same 80-20 rule, right? 20% is going to do 80% of the work, and you can apply it everywhere.
The hardest part, starting out, what my hardest part was to learn those lessons. Is the people person stuff. Now, being able to sniff out the ones that this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And then having the ability to just say, you don't need every job. But like, believe me, I would rather not do a job on a day than go and do a job for somebody that is just going to be nothing but a headache.
Right.
Tell people all the time, all of this equipment that I own, it doesn't cost me anything until I leave the shop yard with it. Right. Everything can sit right here, and I'm broke even for the day. So I'm going to go do the work that I want to do because I'm excited about it. And if I'm dreading going to see this person or oh God, I don't want to go here because he's going to be sitting there staring at me out the window and asking me why I took 15 minutes to grab something to eat or whatever. Like, no, man, that's not my gig. You can find somebody else that hasn't learned this lesson yet, but I'm not your guy.
So yeah, you've already taken that philosophy and incorporated it into your interactions with the customers before you actually choose to do the work or give them an estimate. Some of those guys need to be taught that. Be like, hey, go write down all the similarities that the worst customers you ever had in common. And then when you're having an estimate conversation, like, oh, if the red flag goes off for one of those problems, this is probably the outcome that you're going to get. Same one that you had with that guy 2 years ago, right? So start recognizing, oh, this guy's going to be in the bottom 20%. Like, do I really need to take this job, or should I just cut it loose? Is the job so big it's worth it? Like, there's always a couple things you need to walk through, but
there's several of those. Is the job big enough? My father has laughed at me several times on going to look at certain jobs, and I've looked at, I would say, at least a half a dozen or a dozen of them over the last couple of years, where you go out and you look at it and you think, man, I don't want to do this. But the customer's sitting there saying, I want you to do it. I got to have you do it. I got to have it done. I got to do this. I got to do that. You're the only person I want to call, and all of this stuff, because I've seen what your work is. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be a nightmare. So what I have done in the past is just try to price yourself out of the job.
Yes.
I mean, I've told my father 100 times, I say, listen, there's a difference between what it costs to do the job and what it costs to have me do the job. So I'll go up and you can just give an estimate that is absurd. And if they call you back and they say, man, we're not going to go with that, I just say, okay. And I know for a fact that I didn't really want the job anyway, so I didn't lose anything. But if they accept it and you think, well, I'll do it for that price.
Yeah.
So it's not, there is a little bit of a guilt factor in it sometimes. I usually try, and if I do price it out and it goes smoother than expected, I'll work with the customer or whatever. But I mean, there shouldn't be a guilt factor.
I'm telling you, Greg, there shouldn't be a guilt factor for that, because one, they're paying for the quality, they're paying for the peace of mind, they're paying for the perceived outcome. And then the one thing most people forget about is, like, they're paying. It's just like buying designer jewelry from a specific designer. Like, oh, I'm wearing a Jacques Cousteau or whatever. I don't buy jewelry, right? But they're going to walk around saying, oh, this is a Greg Polar project. Like, there's a reason that the custom home builders promote their brand, because they can charge more for it, because people want that guy to build their house.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right.
It's sometimes it turns into like a little bit of a status thing too. So, yeah, like I remember when we were looking at doing some projects outside of like fabricated metal, and like guy's advice to me was, say a number so high until you crack a smile that you think it's ridiculous that you're saying that number, and then back it off a little bit so you don't smile. So it's like, if you think you can charge $8,000 for it, tell them it's 25. And if you're like, geez, that's ridiculous, then say 20, 22. Like, but that was his model. I'm like, that's a ridiculous model. But
yeah, and another thing I've noticed after listening to several of the podcast guys talk about is they'll do things hourly rated and all this stuff. I do nothing hourly, nothing.
Yeah.
It's my mindset is that if I'm doing your project and I go look at a job and I think it's going to take me 4 hours, 5 hours to do it. Well, I also have an hour to get everything loaded up, an hour to get everything offloaded. I wash all of my equipment gets washed when it gets brought back to the shop. Every single time it shows up back at the shop, hot water pressure wash. It needs to look good when I go to the next one. And all of those things need to factor in. So chances are, if I go do a project, I might only be on site for 3 hours, but I can't go do another project that day. So you're going to pay for the full day. You're not paying me for how long it takes me to do the job. You're paying me for my expertise on knowing how to get that job done in an efficient manner, because I could very easily go do a very basic job and it could turn into a 14-hour ordeal. And I'm only going to pay you or charge you for that one day because I had a breakdown or I had something go wrong, a flat tire on the way to the job site, something like that. I mean, you can't anticipate any of those things. So
yeah. And I always use the example for guys when we're talking about this, and I'm like, you're creating friction between you and the customer by saying, well, this is my hourly rate. We have a minimum of 4 hours. We have a mobilization fee of this. We potentially have this. It's like, okay, that's a lot of friction. That it's not making it easy for him to say yes. Like if you went and got your oil changed and the guy didn't say it was like I think the diesel truck for me is like $90 to 120. Like he just gives me a number. And I'm like, cool, do it. But if he told me, well, the filter's $29.95. We think it's going to take 20 minutes, but it might take 40 minutes. So the labor is going to cost between A and B. And then we have this for a fee. And then we have a lift fee of $5. I'd be like, I'll go find somewhere else to do it. Yeah, but that's what we do to our customers. And we always have that mindset. Well, I got to protect myself. I'm like, no, you got to provide value to them. And then the price is irrelevant.
The only thing I do itemize in all of my estimates and in my invoices is material.
Sure.
Because it's just, I tell people all the time, this is an estimate, not a quote. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between quotes and estimates. So I can come and tell you that I'm going to have to put 72 yards in there. And if I end up having to put 90 in there, then you're going to be charged for 90. There also is a disclaimer in all of my estimates and my invoices that states that anything over what is in the estimate will be discussed with the customer prior to me doing it. I'm not going to surprise you with another $1,000 worth of material. You're going to know before I have to do it. Say, hey, this is taking way more than what I had anticipated. What do you want me to do? You do it long enough, you're not off by much. It's pretty rare that you're off. If anything, what I've started to lean towards doing is that if it, our triaxle trucks or 18-yard trucks up here, if it's going to take 40 yards, I just put 54 on the estimate. People are happy when it's $300 less than what you told them than they are if it's $200 more. Right.
Greg, genius. We talk about it all the time. Like, how nice is it to give your customer a discount at the end of the project?
Yeah.
Instead of a change order for more.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that anything is ever more. I try to just build in a little bit of a buffer factor, because if your mindset is that this is an estimate, you're better off to overestimate. And then when, like you said, when it's all done, if they're willing to pay what is on that estimate, that means that if you charge them less. I've never heard anybody complain because you charged them less money than what they thought they were going to have in it.
No, and that's got a twofold effect too, right? Like, one, you've got a customer for life because you're truthful and honest. And two, he's going to be a megaphone in the community, bragging about how it was supposed to be 8,500 and I got it for 79. Like,
yeah,
guys, people just can't help themselves, right? So, like, customer for life and a megaphone and like speaking reviews for you in public.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem with a lot of the undercutting that's starting to happen with people doing earthwork now. Is that the market's getting a little bit tighter. And you see a lot of people that are undercutting it, and then they're just thinking, oh, well, if I just get my foot in the door and show up on site, they're going to have to pay me. Well, I would rather not do your job than have to charge you an extra amount of money and have you angry at me, right? Like, my whole thought process through everything has always been that you're only as good as your last, the oil field thing, it's your last screw up, I guess. Right. Yep. So if you go out and if I can make 10 customers happy, all it takes is one that's pissed, and they're going to spread that word way more than all the 10 people that are happy.
Don't you remember when we were kids and your dad told you nobody talks about it when you do it right, but everybody forgets when you do it wrong? It's the same philosophy. Yeah. And
the last thing I want to do is be the guy that put in this immaculate lawn and somebody shows up and says, hey, who did your lawn? And I said, don't hire that freaking guy. He's going to tell you one price and charge you a different. So it doesn't even matter how good of a job you did. You blindsided them with something and they don't appreciate it. So always go over what you think it's going to be. And then at the very least, you're charging them a little bit less or about the same of what it is that you're looking at.
Yeah. And I honestly think I hear about the weekend warrior guys all the time that either rent equipment or they bought a old skid steer and they're trying to break in the market and they're doing it by undercutting cost. And I'm like, if they're basing their entire business model on doing it cheaper, one, all you gotta do is wait. They're going to run out of money. And two, the customers that are so price driven are your bottom 20%. Like, be grateful he's taking them off your plate because you don't have to deal with their headaches.
Oh, I am grateful by all means. The phone rings now. They're very, very rare that I have those people that I just have to say no, thank you. It's not very common now.
Greg, when's the last time you went into a new development of $500,000 homes and saw a weekend warrior picking up 7, 8, 9, 10 yards in that neighborhood? You're not gonna.
Yeah, no.
Because the people are like, well, you don't do this for a living? I just spent $500,000. I want it done right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, the people that I want to work for anyway certainly think that way.
So. That's what I'm getting at, right? And those are the ones that if you do it right, we don't have a lot of changes in the process. We don't have a lot of complaints. We just go, looks great. Here's your money. Like, it's perfect. So I always say that those weekend warriors, if they're cutting into your business to the point that you're struggling, assess your business, not complain about them. Provide more value, find better customers, maybe look at a different niche.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the downside for us is that, like obviously our grass growing season is relatively small compared to the rest of the country.
Yeah.
So you have to squeeze a lot of it in at one time. I mean, it'll be 6-7 days a week a lot of times. As long as I can get topsoil brought to the job site, I'll work. But then I have all winter to kind of recoup and do all that. So, we get into some other relatively small stuff. I try to take on 1 or 2 commercial projects a year. I refuse to plow snow. It's just too hard on the equipment. And it's just, if the way I look at it is if I wasn't successful enough spring, summer, and fall that I have to sit there and plow snow all winter, then I was doing something wrong.
Yeah. But there's also guys out there that can't sit home all winter and they just go plow snow to get out of the house.
Yeah. And I certainly wouldn't blame them at all for doing that. It's such a headache. The biggest thing for me, I find, is that it ties me down. I can't go anywhere, right? I work so hard spring, summer, and fall that, my family does have to take a back seat sometimes to a lot of the things that dad has to do for work. So in the wintertime, that's our opportunity to go on vacation. We go on a cruise. We go do, something. And where if you're plowing snow, man, I can't go anywhere.
Especially in Maine.
We get a snowstorm. You got to be there, and I have to be there by 4:30 in the morning so people can go to work. So, I try not to do anything of that nature. Winter times now, there's a guy that I've become pretty good friends with that he owns a large site work company. So I'll go just run equipment for him or do whatever odds and ends stuff as needed sort of thing. I just sit there and help him out and do what he needs. I learn a lot doing a lot of those large commercial projects. It's if you think you have it all figured out, you're wrong all the time. So
if you're the smartest man in the room, you're in the wrong room, right?
Right. I'm always trying to analyze what it is everybody else is doing and how they do things in a more efficient way to do it and those sort of things. So I do a little bit of that in the wintertime. I have gone out in the past and done some consultation work offshore where you just kind of go out and help. They'll have you go out and just say, look, this is how things should be done. But I didn't do it last year. I did some earthwork stuff here. We're going on a cruise this January. So be a good time.
Very cool, man. Very cool. I got one last question. I know we've been kind of going now for about an hour and I don't want to take too much of your day, even though it's a maintenance day, but I'm always intrigued when guys talk about hydro seeding. Like, what was the trigger for you to say this is the right piece of equipment for us to add to our fleet?
Well, I don't do the hydro seed, honestly. I sub it.
Okay.
So the hydro seed, I have another friend of mine who has owned a hydro seed company in the past. And then he has sold almost all of his stuff. He owns a large site work company now. And when I first started doing this, I had asked him, I'd said, hey, I'm thinking about buying hydro seed. What do you think? And he told me, he's like, don't do it. And I said, well, why wouldn't I do it? And he says, well, by the time you have to take the time in order to apply the hydro seed, you have to go get the materials, you have to pay for the equipment, you have to haul it separately, all of those things. He says, you're pretty much going to spend an entire day doing a hydro seed job that you're making a profit of 4 to 5, 6 cents a square foot. So it's just not beneficial to do it. At that same time, I ended up having a guy that used to work with my father. He started a hydro seed company and they work, their name's called H&S Hydro Seed, free plug, H&S Hydro Seed. So Shannon had started this H&S Hydro Seed company. He works for the phone company where my father used to work. And I had a discussion with him and told him, hey, look, I need a guy that can hydro seed, but I need these hydro seed jobs done when I ask to have them done. And he said, man, we're your guy, right? There's 2 of them. It's him and another buddy of his. They own the company. They still have their full-time jobs and they go out and they spray hydro seed whenever needed. Now they do a lot of their own work off at the other side, but it's a huge benefit having another contractor that is always wanting to work with you and help you out. And you maintain a relationship with them where I can pick up the phone and say, hey, Shannon, I got 24,000 needs to be sprayed at this address. Can you do it Friday? Or can you do it Saturday? He tries to do them on the weekends. So I'll try and make sure that I'm completed on a Thursday or Friday, have everything completely prepped, and they show up in hydro seed and it's a done deal.
Yeah. We had a guy that was looking at buying hydro seed, and this was a while ago. So, but we got out a spreadsheet and like cost of equipment, cost of this, the seed, where do you get the water from and the trailer. And like, we were doing the math and we're like, that's some really good profit if you can keep it busy. Like, to me, it was like a no brainer because
Yeah.
you don't have to have a super skilled laborer spraying hydro seed. Like, you could get a 65-year-old retired operator that doesn't want to break his back anymore. Say, hey, drive around with this water wagon and go carry this hose around and spray it right. And he's gonna be like, awesome, I'm still in the field, but I'm not picking a shovel. I'm not doing this. So to me, I'm always like, hydro seed enamors me as an add-on service if it lines up with your niche, because it just looked to me like the numbers were really good. And a lot of guys don't want to, so you could also sub it out. You could almost have like a separate division.
Yeah, I have contemplated in the past approaching the guys over at that hydro seed company and asking them if they want to become a partner of mine. I know that a lot of their work is my work.
Yeah.
I've never asked them to like what is the actual percentages, but I know that I keep them pretty busy, and it's just really nice to not have anything else hanging over my head. I'm trying to do all of this completely by myself. I don't really want to deal with having employees and all of this stuff that I'm always having to juggle something. I do all of my own maintenance on everything. One of the engineering background stuff, I cannot pay somebody to work on my stuff. So I don't need anything else to work on, right? So I make a little bit of money on the hydro seed, almost next to nothing. It basically just pays for my phone call, but it's so easy to just know that I can laser focus in on the earthwork side of it and make sure everything is done. And as soon as I'm done, these guys are going to come in and just spray it green and it's going to be done right.
And for your model of wanting to maintain, a one-man primaral show with a couple seasonal guys, it's the right choice to make. Right. If you're trying to grow and
I don't regret it.
Have 2 or 3 crews and all that, like maybe that's a different conversation. And I'm a huge proponent, man. Like, success is where you want your life to be, not based on number of employees and dollars revenue every year.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Luckily I spent a long time working offshore and made a really good living for a long time. And I was smart about my money. You'd have guys that would get these massive tax returns and they're showing up with side by sides and all this other stuff. And I was never that guy. I always just kind of squirreled it away and put it on the house and all that sort of stuff. So we live pretty simple now. We don't need a whole lot. I don't have a ton of bills. So I don't have to go and do something every single day. And I'm never going to allow myself to get stretched to a position where I have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt hanging over my head and all of that stress. I'd rather just kind of putter away at what I'm doing and take care of my stuff because it takes care of me. And I don't have a massive stressful life where I can't sleep at night. So
I love it, man. I love it. Well, man, what a great conversation. Cool story. Like, I can see why you'd want to get off the oil rigging. Like, as the family grows and develops, it's just not suitable for that lifestyle. I'd love that you found like a tight niche and that you're just doubling down on that. And it's exciting, man. Yeah. So I can't thank you enough for coming on and spending some time with me and being able to talk culture and people and management experience. And I get off on that stuff. So I really enjoyed the conversation today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Well, guys, if you're struggling with your management style or your business and trying to get your values and find your niche and figure out exactly what business looks like for you, don't forget, we also have a program called Groundbreaking Growth. You can go over to groundbreakinggrowth.com. It is basically a coaching and consulting company that's specifically designed for the excavation industry. In fact, it's so specific that I am your coach. We work with you to develop your values, your mission statement, your estimating skills, your sales skills, your marketing processes, the whole thing. So like, you guys are great in the dirt. That's what you're supposed to be good at. Doesn't mean you're going to be great in other areas. Find help for that, whether it's through Groundbreaking Growth or somewhere else. Go get the business help that you need. If you're interested to learn more, groundbreakinggrowth.com. Until next week, guys, stay warm, everybody that's not in the South.